Hi, Susie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. You know, um, I know that you've written some books, but you're basically here because you are a publishing consultant. You run a business called Finish the Book Publishing. And I think that what you will have to say in this conversation may be of great value to some of my past authors or future authors who are watching this channel. So I'm really glad to have you on the show,
Thank you so much. I do hope that somebody in your audience gleans something from this conversation.
including myself, because I'm very curious too. I've also written some books. Now, before we get into your company, give us a little backstory who you are and how you got started, and perhaps you can mention your books that you've written as well, though I'm more interested in your company. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I spent over 30 years in corporate America. Worked in human resources. My background is in hospitality, which is why the pineapple. um, and and also I did a stint in commercial television and radio. And so I just had this very vast background, and I had the opportunity to learn the publishing industry. And as I learned more about it, I really found that I loved helping people share their stories and get their books published and out into the world, where they can control all of it, keep their royalties and their copyrights, and not have the challenges that go along with traditional publishing.
And there are plenty of those. Tell you what I'm really weak at is after I've written the book and it's printed and it's been edited and all that. I don't know what to do about it really. There's book fairs I can't seem to find anywhere I am. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough. I try to get on podcasts myself, and generally I don't hear back from requests to be on certain podcasts. That's what started me to begin this podcast. Tell me about your book. I figured if I can't get onto podcasts, I'll start my own and I'll interview authors.
I love that. You just create your own path. That's fantastic.
Yeah. But
Yeah, it's one of the
I still struggle with my own books. What can a person like me, how can we benefit with signing on to a company like yours?
Yeah, so my company does really everything as far as helping the author through the process of writing, publishing their book, going to launch, bestseller campaign. And then, of course, too, I have so many resources that if somebody really wants to work with a partner to work on their book marketing, that's one of the most important aspects of it, to do their marketing. Then, of course, I have a lot of people that work in that area. I specifically don't offer book marketing, but I have people to connect you to. So when people work with me, I'm like, you tell me what you need and what you want, and I'm going to make those connections for you to get you to the right people. I think that's one of the toughest things for authors is they don't know where to find resources. For example, even a good editor. You can go on and interview people, but if they aren't vetted, if they haven't worked with somebody in the publishing industry, it's really tough to see if they're good at what they do. And so that's one of the benefits to working with someone like me is because I have those relationships, and the people that I work with have been vetted by me, and they help authors be successful.
Hmm. Yeah, it's good. I wasted $73 US, by the way, last year when there's is it Fever or
Fiverr.
Fiverr, yes. And somebody on there promised the world to me. They're going to market it and increase my book sales. Never happened. I paid for a PDF of some really bad book mock-ups. My book it wasn't even the right size. It looked wider, it looked like a coffee table book. It was horrible. And the spine was just an extension of the back of the book. It was awful. I can do a better job in Photoshop. So I guess we do have to watch out for things like that.
Right. And it is important that you are using reputable sources, with people that understand the book industry. It is a very different industry. So someone who might even just claim that they're a graphic designer, they don't necessarily understand book design and how the publishing industry works. So, those are just the fine tuning of your message and making sure that what you're putting out is what you want to put out. Really developing your marketing strategy talks about things like, when I work with my authors, we talk about what I call the trifecta of publishing, which is your story, your brand, your community, and how does all that come together with your cause or your mission? What is the purpose of this? A lot of times that ties into what is your business. Um, most authors are not going to go out and sell 1 million copies of their book. So we have to determine, okay, so what's the bigger story? Why did you write this book? What is your business about? How do they connect? How do you serve your community? Cause publishing is a huge piece of how I created my business and is the foundation of it, because I want people to be able to open the dialogue for conversation, create a movement, drive awareness, whatever it is that they're going to do with their book. So we talk about all those fun things.
Oh, sounds good. I'm very keen on talking about my book with someone who knows what they're talking about and help them guide me. I did it all myself. I'm on a fixed income. I'm a senior citizen. I don't have the kind of money to hire an editor. I was an editor for many years, mind you, as a television editor. I worked on reality television, which is anything but real. So we had to make stuff up all the time. So I noticed that when I was editing my own books, I know you're not supposed to, but I can't help it. I have to do it. I can't afford an editor. That a lot of those skills that I had were quite transferable to being able to what I think is edit my own books. Though I would have preferred to have a third eye, as we used to call it in television.
Exactly.
So, how can a person who doesn't have much money and then still wants to write a book use a service like yours?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough
Well,
one
first,
for me.
yeah, it is a tough question. Um, the first thing is for someone to have a conversation with me, and then we look at things like where do you need help with the book? What are the resources that you can use that are low cost? Um, how does that look? Because you can design a book, create a book, write a book on any type of budget. It just depends on where you want to invest. Of course, I always recommend use good resources. So you can use, for example, Fiverr is one, but you've got to find the right person, right? So that just takes some time. And sometimes the people in this industry do have tips for doing books that are on the lower end of budgets. But yeah, I always recommend make sure that you are, you at least have that second set of eyes to review the book and make sure that there aren't any errors in it, that type of thing.
Mhm.
Sometimes it can be as simple as if you just need somebody to help you upload the files and to make sure that they are that the system accepts them. Those kinds of things can be
Right.
pretty low cost, if you've got everything else dialed in.
Yeah. So when you write a book, and my books, and I've written 6 of them, though I really focus on 3 of them because of the nature of those, that it's a trilogy. I have a feeling, I think I know the demographic. Once you figure out your demographic, how do you go about, you know, focusing in on that demographic?
Mhm. So once you figure out your demographic, then it's really important to do things like look at podcasts and look at book clubs and connect with your local library. Your library is a great resource, and a lot of people don't give it credit. So, but then also go to local bookstores and ask them if they would carry your book. Sometimes what happens though is because authors don't know what they don't know, they make mistakes in their books. And so there's things like there might be some of the formatting issues like an extra space between paragraphs or a book design, cover design that really doesn't have a human readable price on the back cover. Using the free ISBNs, those are all red flags. So bookstores are probably going to say no to your book because it's obvious that your book is self-published. So the trick is to find those resources, or at least have somebody give you feedback and be able to tell you what design elements need to be changed, if there needs to be further editing, those kinds of things, so that when you present your book, it looks like it's professionally published, even though it's independently published. And then going after those local resources like libraries and bookstores and groups that are looking for people to speak on certain topics. And that's a great way to start. Start locally and then branch your way out.
You mentioned free ISBNs not being good.
No,
Explain that.
they're
Talk to me
not.
about that.
Yeah. So both Ingram Spark and KDP offer free ISBNs. However, I see this as a big red flag because the way an ISBN works is the person who has purchased it or the company that's purchased it technically, legally owns that copyright because they own it. ISBNs are non-transferable. So if you are using an Amazon ISBN and Amazon decides to change their policies and said, we own all those ISBNs, we own that content, then you're kind of in a pickle, aren't you?
Hmm.
So my recommendation is do not ever use the free ISBNs. Make sure that you're purchasing your ISBNs. In Canada, there is a place where you can get them for free through Canada's their Library of Congress. But otherwise, in the United States, just buy them on Bowker. It's a $125 investment and is well worth it because you're protecting the rights and royalties of your book, the copyrights.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so like a person like me, I've got free ISBNs and I want to take your advice. And even if I am willing to pay for it, can I change it now? Is it too late?
You need to do a new edition of your book. You can't change an ISBN once it's published. So my recommendation, and I actually work with a lot of authors on this, they publish their book, they didn't have a great experience, their book needs some work. And so we do a republishing of the book, a second edition. Okay. So
Okay.
what we do is we purchase the ISBN, we create a really nice legal copyright page for them. That's one of the things that a lot of authors overlook or make mistakes on is their copyright page. We make sure everything's dialed in. It looks great. The formatting's good. The book cover. You have to change at least 10% of your book in order for you to republish under the same title
Okay.
using a new ISBN, which is fine. It's easy to do. We usually will make a few changes to the cover design too, making sure that that ISBN and that barcode on the back of your book, it should be embedded in the cover file. It should not be one of the free barcodes that Amazon slaps on there because they A, look unprofessional, and B, it's a dead giveaway that you're self-publishing. So
Mhm.
you want to make sure that you have a nice barcode that has a human readable price. It has your ISBN that you've purchased. It all ties together. So once you've republished your book, your second edition book, then you can unpublish your first edition and you can make it unavailable. And it'll take a few weeks to fall off the systems, but it works.
Okay.
And usually what happens is authors are much happier with the second edition because they know that it's had a professional eye look at it. They know that it's appearing more professional than the original one. And it's a common mistake. I work with people all the time that run into that, and it's absolutely okay. There's no shame in making a mistake on your first book, right?
Of course.
No shame.
Hmm. Yeah. So book covers. Now there's, except for actually, yeah, except for three of them. The one right over there.
Yep.
Can't see it. It's called Unfolded and Grown. That's my picture. I took that picture. Beside it, out my second book called Subversive. That is a picture of me when I was more handsome. So actually, my wife took that picture. So these images belong to me.
Hmm.
Whether you think it's a good cover or not, at least I own those pictures. Everything
Yes.
else, like this one, this is here you go. That's the second book of the trilogy, and up here is this is fun to do. This is the that's the third book of the trilogy. This is the second book of the trilogy, and here's the first one.
Hmm.
Okay. Now those images, I don't own those images. I found them. And they look like they tell the story, but I know I could have a better book cover. And if I come to a person, if I come to you and I say, well, look, I've got this book. It's called The Way to Kialo, and it's got a picture of a lone person, obviously hiking with a stick and a backpack. I used to climb mountains, by the way. So
Mm.
a lot of my mountain climbing and hiking experience in the Adirondacks comes into great use because I know what I'm talking about when it comes to going and living in the bush for a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
I was like that when I was younger. So if I say to you, okay, I want something like this, but nicer looking, um, that doesn't sound like a difficult thing for a company like you to be able to put together.
No, it's actually quite simple. And if you have purchase the image, for example, on Shutterstock or one of those others, then you can rightfully use that image. But if you're using a free download from the internet, typically you can't use those images. Those are subject to copyright laws, that type
For
of thing.
sure.
So
For
anyway,
sure.
but I don't see anything wrong with the image. What I would change on your book cover is I would change the fonts. I would
Mhm.
also change the background slightly, because a lot of your book is white. And one of the things that we find is that white covers don't show up well on Amazon. So if you have a slate tint to that cover, it will then actually show up better on the Amazon sales page.
Yeah, it's not white, it's kind of creamy, but I see what you mean. Sure. Let me
Mhm.
just show you the second book. Now, I remember seeing it's just called the Barnabas Trail, and it's still, hiking through the forest and stuff like that. So this is not my image, but I remember taking pictures like that. I just can't seem to find them. So this is darker, but it's
Mhm.
the font that you said. What kind of font would you suggest?
Um, I never can remember the names of the fonts, but what
Yeah.
I do is when I'm working with a book design, we'll go on and we'll look at several different fonts, and do a comparison. But I also notice you have like a black, is that like a black edge around the cover of your book?
Yes, yeah, I
Okay.
didn't mean to do that, but if I make it any larger in KDP, it says that it's gone too far. I want it to bleed right
Exactly.
to the edge, but it didn't want to let me do that.
Exactly. And that's because you're using the KDP cover creator. And again, nothing wrong if you want to do that. But here's the thing. If you were to actually use an actual book design that could take that image and create it so that it is like a full bleed, it's going to look a lot more professional.
Sure will.
So, and while I like the darker color of that, the back of your book is black. Now,
Yeah.
black covers tend to show wear really quickly. So it might even be worth it for you to think about, oh, what if we use on the back cover maybe a lighter gray with black font, because then that lighter gray color is not going to show wear as quickly. It's just little things like this that
Of course.
can actually just make a bit of a difference. And
Yeah.
so, looking at different fonts that might invoke an emotion, in the reader. And then using those same fonts when you're doing the formatting for the interior. It's really important to pull those aspects into the interior as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can do. And sometimes it just takes a trained eye to say, okay, these are the suggestions I would make. And if, for example, your book, like the image didn't fit correctly on the front cover, you might consider downsizing the book. If it's not a really thick book, you could go down from, for example, a 6x9 to a 5.5 by 8.5. And that smaller book size will allow that image to really have that full bleed effect.
hmm Yeah. I heard somewhere, one of my interviews, someone who really knew what they were talking about and was actually quite successful. I listened to those kind of people. And he mentioned, it was a he, and he mentioned that your first time out, you don't want to give the editor, um, it has to be like under 50,000 words. If you're nobody and you say, "Oh, I've got a 120,000 word novel," that a lot of them will turn you down just because that's just too much. Is
It
that
is
true?
too much. It's not, well, and all traditional publishers are going to be different. If you want to publish a book that's 120,000 words, by all means, go for it. My recommendation, though, is to actually take that book and figure out how to break it into two books and create a series. Number
Yeah.
one, it's more
Right.
marketable. Number two, the books that sell are books that are 250 pages and less. That's what's selling. Big, huge books that used to be all the rage are no longer popular. And so if you've got a huge manuscript, fantastic. Let's figure out where that book can be split into two books, create a series, have two products to sell or more if you've got ebook, audiobook, etc. And then you've got something to market. So you release your first book with the sequel coming a few months later. Now you've extended your marketing time. It just is a much better method of publishing versus trying to put out a huge book and hoping it gets traction.
Yeah, well, I understand what you're saying. Let's take a look at my first book here, and I don't think I can see it with these silly glasses, so I'll change my reading glasses. This one's called The Way to Kialo. It has a beginning. There's a reason why this person has to leave where they are
Hmm.
and get to where they need to get to. And I can't imagine breaking this up into 2 books. That's why it's a trilogy. So,
Hmm.
right now it sits at 253 pages,
That's
and
actually perfect. Yeah,
it's a 12-point font, and it's definitely more than 50,000 words. And this is the smaller one, and they get progressively a little bit bigger each time.
yeah.
I think that one, the third one, is 320 pages.
I think
Now,
you're still right within that range. You're
okay.
absolutely fine the way yours is. Yeah.
Okay, because I
Yeah.
can't imagine I can see perhaps cutting this down a bit, losing maybe 20, 30 pages. It's possible. But you can't split a story that has a beginning going from this point to that point and all the
Exactly.
points in between, all the hassles that the person has to go through.
Right.
Where would I split it and why?
But I
But
love
this,
that you did a trilogy because this makes sense. Instead of doing one book for that contains all three of those, doing the trilogy makes sense. And it's actually a much better method of doing it because now you have three books and you have a trilogy and you have a
yeah,
library as an author.
yeah.
So yeah, that was a
And I'm
good
working
move.
on a prequel right now. The prequel explains, I'm not the first to come up with this idea. This is sort of a speculative fiction verging on
Mhm.
fantasy. The prequel starts 117 years before the first book, and it explains a lot of the things that happen and why we find that, well, why when you get to this book, when you look at that, and it's an imaginary world and what's going on. And some people have said, not too many, but they say, I don't know what's going on. Well, it's a different world. It's not this world, it's
Exactly.
another world.
Right.
So obviously, I have different words for everything.
Hmm.
Back to the demographics. In my case, the reason I'll tell you why I wrote this trilogy. I went through a phase in my life where I was religious,
Hmm.
and I walked away from Pentecostal religion, Christianity, when I was 46, but I remained a deist until 57 after struggling. And I had been to seminary when I was younger, and I was pretty good understanding biblical theology and all that. But then I identified as an atheist. And the first thing I thought of at age 57, and I'm 66 now, was I should write a book. I should write a book. I had already written one book, so I thought my second book should be all about my journey, as it were, from theism, like Pentecostal, really extreme Christianity,
Right.
to now to a much more rational view of the world as an atheist. Agnostic atheist is basically what I am.
Mhm.
And I thought about that for about 10 minutes and I thought, who would want to read that? Like, who am I? If I was some famous pastor or, some televangelist who gave up the faith, perhaps someone would want to read that story, but I'm just a guy who gave up on religion. So then I decided to write my story and then I could, in fictional form and just exaggerate everything, you know. Anyway,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
what's my demographic? Is it people, within the atheist community? Is it people who are seeking? Who's my demographic? I don't know who would want to read this now that I've written it.
So, and that's an interesting topic because really, when you're writing the book, that's when you should be identifying who your target market is because you want to write for that reader. So, I actually feel like your book actually might fall into the whole idea of because you talk about different worlds and things like that, the sci-fi fantasy genre actually might do really well because I think in sci-fi fantasy, even mysticism, there's a lot of talk about people who have religious backgrounds and have left religion, the structured religion, into more mystical and agnostic beliefs. And so I think that your book actually would do probably pretty well in um, like fantasy and sci-fi, but
Hmm.
also any of the new age thought, new world thought, anything like that.
Okay.
Um, would do probably pretty well. Because that really is, those are like-minded people that have been through some kind of transformation or change or, re-establishing their belief system.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, somebody once said that by my description, it's speculative fiction because I called it fantasy for a while, but there's no dragons. There's nothing unbelievable. Nothing's happening. There's no magic, right? It's just simply condensed version of our world. I think I've written somewhere on this world we have 7 trillion square miles of land, but in my world there's only 12,500 square miles of land, and so people walk everywhere, and all these different
Mhm.
communities represent individual religions. And as this
Right.
person's going through it all, he's experiencing all these different belief systems and having arguments with people along the way until he finally gets to Kialo, which is the way to Kialo. And Kialo, the word Kialo, is uh, means reason in Esperanto, if you remember that language they tried to
Yes.
say is going to. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's all it
So
is.
it's interesting because too, I feel like there even either I can't remember if there's a category, but there is one that I think is loosely like alternate universes and things like that. Your book would do well in a category like that. So
Mhm.
then let me ask you this. What do you have listed for your BISAC codes on your copyright page?
Go ahead. Sorry, what was that again?
What do you have listed for your BISAC codes on your copyright
I don't know what that
page?
means.
Okay,
I said codes.
this is so cool. I love it
Okay.
when we go down this rabbit hole.
Okay.
So your BISAC codes are the book industry standards and guides. It is the codes that is the root or foundation for all categories for books. Okay. If you go, and it's bisg.org is the website. So when you're developing your copyright page and you're figuring out, okay, who's this book for? What categories do I want to see this book in, right? If you start with your BISAC codes, those categories or those codes are the starting point for developing where you're going to end up putting your book in the categories when you upload your files on Ingram Spark and KDP. So when you establish those, that is really kind
Oh,
of the start of your path. And then
awesome.
I like to have usually 3 BISAC codes on the copyright page. And then when I'm uploading the files, I'm using those codes to identify what are the categories and how close can I get. Now, the categories are going to be different. Even on KDP, the categories for a paperback and the categories for an ebook can be different because they don't offer the same thing. But if you're using those BISAC codes as the foundation or root for that, and then you're expanding out from there, it's actually going to put you into the best categories for your book. And that's also going to help readers find you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I do
get
a
the
lot of BISAC research for my
Oh,
authors.
okay.
So when I'm writing the copyright, their legal copyright page for them, I do all that research and I say, okay, here's a list of all these codes. I'm going to highlight my recommendations and tell you what order I think they should go in, but give me your feedback. This is a conversation. Like
Yeah.
we want to work through this together. It's not me saying you have to do this. It's me saying, this is what I found on my research. This is what I think would be good for you. What do you think? And at the same time, we're looking at what does the back cover description look like? Does
Mm.
that bring the reader in? Does that entice the reader to want to learn more and read this book? Is it geared towards that target market that you're going after? So all these things kind of tie together, they all weave together. And so sometimes it just helps to have somebody help you navigate that.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Cool. Cool. Well, I think I'm a fairly positive person. I like to see the bright side of things. And I spent the last few months in a lot of hospital waiting rooms.
Mm,
So I decided to take this book, not this exact one, but another one like it, um, and started reading it, just to see. It's been 3 years since I've written it. And I must have gone through, I think, 15 or 16 edit passes. As I said, I had to edit it myself, and I was so convinced eventually that it's perfect that I went on the first chapter I'm reading and going, oh, you know what? I would word that differently. That sentence is that should come before. No, what was I thinking?
that's normal.
You know,
Yes, that's normal. But see, that's why using really good editors can help you identify those things, because sometimes what happens is we get in our heads. The other thing is there's the psychology that the way our brains work. So when we're looking at a manuscript on a screen, reading it, typing it through, making our edits and all those kinds of things, our brain works differently than when we actually have a physical book in our hands and we're reading it on the paper. Our
Yeah.
brain works differently.
So
So
true.
this is why it's important to, even after you've published your book, to get that proof copy and read it.
Hmm.
And if it's a long book, I tell people, enlist your family members, make it fun. Like, everybody reads a chapter out loud to each other. And I said, it's amazing what comes up for
Yeah.
authors going through that process, because they're hearing it and seeing it in a different manner, which means our brains work differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's normal to like go back and read your book. I've done the same with mine. I've gone back and read things that I wrote and went, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was working on the second book, and certainly by the third book, that I realized that one of my favorite words to use is but.
Mm.
I say something, but, and there's so many buts. And so I imagine there's fewer buts in the other versions, but in this one, in chapter one, it's like, oh no, another but. Oh my God. Oh no, no, there's another but. What's with all these buts? Is there another way of saying that? I wondered. So I
You
started
change it
using,
to the word and
mm,
see if it changes. Like,
yeah,
go read a sentence and change the word but to and
you're right.
see, how does that feel? Like, how
Hmm.
does that sound? Is that good? I also will do word searches. Like, once I have the manuscript up, I'll do a word search for things like but and that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy because you can go in and search those and say, oh my goodness, like, my word is that. I use that a lot.
Yeah.
So you're in good company.
Okay. So I'm so tempted to ask you, what does this cost? But I'm sure that there's not one fee. It depends on what you're offering, right?
That is exactly right. Yeah.
Exactly. So we'll leave that question alone, and perhaps in private, you and I could talk about, here's what I would, be willing to spend, and focusing on, well, and getting buying an ISBN number. I can see the value of that, or perhaps you
Mhm.
say in Canada it's free. Either way, it's not that much money. And then cover,
Mhm.
and but here we go. But I imagine the biggest cost would be editing, and I'm sure I can't
Mhm.
afford that.
Right.
So yeah. So
But
we,
see, and there's a but too. It's all relative. Like, if, there are some books I work on that, are upwards of 15, $20,000. If you want a ghostwriter, they start at 30,000. So, these big numbers are all very relative. I work with corporate teams sometimes. And so, they've got in-house designers and they've got people that are doing the editing and everything else, but then they don't even know how to navigate the system. So people might bring me in and to work with a corporate team to give them guidance, because a lot of times their designers have not designed a book, but also to set up their publishing accounts, to get the books uploaded, to help them with pre-orders, to go through launch, bestseller campaign, all of those things. So that system may be completely different than me working on another book where I'm actually working directly with the ghostwriter,
mhm.
and we're talking through editing. So it really depends. And so you're right, I always recommend, just, there's a little button on my website, it says it's a consultation, it's free, 30 minutes of my time to get you through understanding where your book's at, where you want to go with it, what's the best direction, talk about your budget, what do you want to spend money on, what do you not want to spend money on, how can we make this so that it happens for you? Because the last thing I ever want to tell somebody is no. Because if it's not a fit for me, I'm going to find them the right person, or I'm going to give them the resources to
Yeah.
be able to do it themselves,
Yeah.
because there's no reason why you shouldn't publish. But if you're going to do it on your own, I want you to put your best foot forward. I want you to come out of the gate feeling like you've got a book that's solid, and that you can approach libraries and bookstores and ask, people to, okay, would you like to read this book for my book club or whatever,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, that's the whole mission and purpose behind my company. It's,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
helping people get their books out.
All right.
So
I have one more question. I am not impressed with the printing um, machine, or whatever they use. Here's an example of what happens uh, with a KDP printed book. It and this is because I read this every once in a while. I can't show you what this book is because it's a secret.
Okay.
Um, but and there's reason for that. But this is what happens to it.
Yeah.
It's nothing like a book that you buy in the store. It's nothing like it. And not
Right.
only that, but hardcover, which here's the hardcover. Here's a soft cover version of Unfolded and Grown, and here's a hardcover version. All right.
Mhm.
So again, I have plenty of books. I just need to, they're all over here and you can't see them, but I have many books.
Mine are
This,
under my desk. They're all
yeah,
like
this
Scott.
is not like any hardcover book that you buy in a store. It's kind of,
Yeah.
when you look at it, it's cheap.
Yes.
Right.
So, and
So
that came from KDP.
it did.
Okay.
If
So
I
if you
want, if I
really,
want,
if
if I want to have books looking like, if I buy the covers, I pay the money for the covers, I do all the right colors, the right fonts, or
Mhm.
things that are going to be that, and then send it to KDP, and I get that kind of quality, I
I
won't be
know.
happy. What's my
Yeah.
alternative?
Okay. So the method that I use when I'm working with clients is we will publish a paperback and the ebook on KDP. Okay. Part of that reason is because I love to be able to do a bestseller campaign using the ebook. There's lots of great things that KDP offers, like your author page, your Amazon A+ content. There's a lot of cool things that they offer. So you want to make sure that you have that. But really, the way you should be publishing is by using Ingram Spark. First of all, their quality is better. I don't even do hardcovers on Amazon because I don't like the quality. I do
Mhm.
hardcovers and paperback on Ingram. So you have a paperback on both platforms, but that's okay. The crossover doesn't matter. What does matter is that you have a paperback and hardcover on Ingram, because Ingram is where book buyers buy. Ingram and their partners like Baker and Taylor and such. Book buyers for libraries and bookstores and other places, they don't buy from Amazon. So if your book is only on Amazon, you're never going to get picked up in a bookstore.
Okay.
They buy from Ingram Spark, and you need to do the 55% wholesale discount for book buyers. But the quality is so much better,
Mm,
so much better. So,
good.
um, yeah, I just
Okay.
recommend that that's probably the way to go. And Ingram gives you options like using either a cloth cover or a laminate cover with your hardcover with a dust jacket.
Yeah.
Um, and KDP doesn't offer that.
No.
So that's my recommendation. And this is, again, goes back to ISBNs. When you're purchasing your ISBNs, just buy the 10 pack. It's $2.95, but you have 10 ISBNs to use.
Mm,
So I use different ISBNs on Ingram Spark and KDP
okay.
because sometimes the systems don't like to talk to each other.
Mm,
Depends on what day of the week it is
yeah.
sometimes. But that way you've identified, you have separate ISBNs for the two paperback versions that you're publishing. You also want to list your hardcover ISBN and your digital version. It just, when you have all these things and you lay them out and it's done, it just makes things so much easier for you on the back end, like when you're doing promotion and talking to bookstores, libraries, and seeing if somebody wants to carry your book, that type of thing. So
Excellent.
yeah.
All right, Susie.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. There's a lot that's involved, and a lot of people don't know that, you know, that's how it works. And so just having somebody to help you understand it and understand how the systems talk to each other and how everything's connected. I do have a little ebook on Amazon. It's I call it a mini book. Mini books are books that are less than 100 pages. It's called Your First Book. It's $2.99. It's a little ebook. You can also get the printed version, which I just slapped it together. I did not do professional design. I was like, no, I just want to get this thing out. So, you know, uh, I'm a great example of just like throwing something on there just because I wanted to. But yeah, you can get Your First Book, the publishing guide for new authors. It's a great little guide, and if somebody does a consultation with me, they get it for free. I send it to them.
Excellent.
So yeah,
Well,
yeah.
So nice.
Whatever I can do to help authors, right?
Yeah, I feel the same way. That's what I'm trying to do here as well. So
Yeah, I love that you're doing this because I think there's a lot of people that they just need guidance, they need help,
yeah,
and the internet is so vast that they where do they start, right?
right.
So,
I'm getting a lot of authors now that are very serious and they're doing quite well, and that's good for the show. But I would say that currently at least a third of the authors that I am in touch with are like me. They're the creative people, wrote a book, and then they don't know what to do about it. They put it on
right,
Amazon, they cross their
exactly.
fingers, hope for the best. I think them watching this is going to help, and hopefully
Yeah.
you'll get some business out of it too yourself.
Well, thank you. And even if I didn't get any business out of it, if there's some nugget in here that helped somebody, then hey, I've done my job.
Ah, well, we're both on the same track. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, Susie, finally.
Well, thank you so much, John. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I will look forward to when this airs.
Okay, want me to tell you when that is? Hold on a sec.
Okay,
April 17th.
perfect. Okay, I'm marking my
That's on
calendar.
YouTube. But what I do, and usually this isn't a post chat, so this is a different kind of episode, so I'll just tell you.
Right.
What I do is I edit this. Today it'll be edited, and I'll put it up on a Facebook page that I started called Tell Me About Your Book. And that's where I put people's, every episode goes there in case, somebody's date is so far down the road, June or something like that. No, you can have the episode. You can use the link to put on your social media. So I do that for
Perfect.
authors as well.
Awesome.
All
That's
right, so I'll
great.
be in
I love
touch
this.
with you. And again, pleasure having you on the show.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please consider hitting that like button and leaving a comment. You could also subscribe and ring that bell because I release 2 episodes per week, one on Wednesdays and one on Saturdays. And if you are an author, I would love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.